Good morning, Sault Ste. Marie. Welcome to another edition of ONNPoint. I'm Andy Martins. We're just after 11 o'clock. We're live on TV. We're live on Facebook. And on today's show, Mike Delfrey from the United Way Harvest Algoma. Got a lot to talk about, and we'll get to that right after these commercial messages.
Home, lighting is just as important as style.
With PowerView Motorization from Hunter Douglas, you can schedule your shades to light up the room, create privacy, or both, automatically. No hands required.
So your shades will always be in the right place at the right time in style. And it's only from Hunter Douglas.
Angelo, it's me, Vito. Imbecile, your brother. Listen, you bring 10 gallons of flat eggshell of white paint.
This past year, we've been celebrating our 65th anniversary, dating back to services originating in our community in 1954, which is quite some time ago. It's been a great opportunity this past year to recognize the pioneers, the stakeholders that worked tirelessly to create what we are today. I'm grateful for everything that the families 65 years ago and the people that assembled the organization have done in order for us to achieve the success that we're experiencing 65 years later.
This is On TV.
Welcome back to ONNPoint. Andy Martins here, and my guest, Mike Delfrey from United Way Harvest Algoma. Good morning, Mike. Welcome back to the show. It's been a long time, and I'm glad you're back.
Well, it's nice to be back, Andy. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to come back and talk about all the things that are happening with the United Way and with Harvest Algoma in Sault Ste. Marie.
Exactly. You have a lot happening between now and May. And how have things gone with Harvest Algoma and the United Way in the last year before we get to your big event that's coming up?
Well, things have gone just wonderfully particularly because of the support we've received in the community from a wide range of people, including restaurants and grocery stores that are donating food, volunteers who are helping us process food, just a wide range of people as our movement gets traction in the community in response to the size of the need that there is in terms of hunger and food insecurity. So we're really pleased that we've been able to get this level of activity in such a short period of time. We'll only be 2 years old this July, so we're pretty pleased with where we've come in a short period of time.
Right, and there is a need in this community, Mike. In the last couple of weeks, I've seen some pretty devastating situations where it kind of blew my mind that, we all think we need more. Everybody says they need more money, but there is a need in this community, and a lot of people don't know how bad it is.
Well, one of the things about hunger that we know is that it's hidden. Unlike homelessness, when you have people sleeping on the street, you can see that.
Right.
Hunger is more of a hidden problem, and for many people, particularly large families, if they're on social assistance, or seniors are a really big group of people that struggle with food insecurity because they have priorities they need to pay, their rent or utilities and medicines, etc. So food becomes a discretionary item. And we know from inputs we've received from agencies we support that the problem seems to be growing in Sault Ste. Marie, I think largely because of the economy, the increased cost of food, a number of factors that are making the problem worse. So we have a big job ahead of us.
Right, and you're right at it. Now you've got a big event coming up, Construction, and how did this event come about in Sault Ste. Marie? How did you decide to do it this year?
Well, we were approached by the Station Mall, the merchants, and the marketing manager, Michelle Cicchini, who contacted us to ask if we would be willing to coordinate the Construction event. It was held in Sault Ste. Marie about 10 years ago, but then no one really picked it up and carried it on as an annual event. So we looked into it. We looked at the Construction website. We talked to some of the people that had been involved in it in the past. And we agreed that it was a good fit for Harvest Algoma. It's a food drive, except that it doesn't compete with the other food drives in the community because it's not a door-to-door drive.
Right.
It's a contest where teams from businesses and organizations will create structures out of primarily canned foods or packaged foods. So we put a committee together with the mall and with some volunteers. The mall has been wonderful. They sponsored the fee to Construction for us to be in it. We've been working with grocers to give us better deals on the cost of food, and we've been actively and aggressively recruiting teams. So we will hold our competition at the last week of April and the first week of May. It'll be in the Station Mall. The exhibits will be there. People can vote on their favorite exhibit. There's a number of categories for prizes that the teams can win. Everything from the most complex design and construction to the exhibit that makes the structure that uses the most cans. We're following a little bit of the lead that Sarnia and their construction team, they've been at it 10 years now, and we've talked to them several times. Their 10th anniversary, their construction event raised over 40,000 cans of food.
Wow.
And then at the end of the competition, of course, that food comes into the Food Resource Center and is distributed to the agencies. We currently support 30 organizations and soup kitchens and food banks in Sault Ste. Marie and Algoma. So it's going to be a fun event for teams to get involved in. It's a very good, it's a creative exercise. They've got to come up with a really unique design for an exhibit.
Right. And Rory Ring and Michelle Cicchini would have some sort of idea. They were in Sarnia before, how that was run. So that would be good input you would have as well.
Yeah, she has experience from both the Sarnia Construction event, and she knows people who organized the event there. So she's been able to get some really good tips for us and some things to avoid so to make our first event seamless. We do intend to try to make this an annual event. We're hoping we can recruit at least 5 to 8 teams for our first event this year. And we have some interested businesses and organizations. We actually have a high school class that's interested in coming into the competition. So we're pretty optimistic. People are going to have a lot of fun for a very good cause.
I know it's early yet, being February 3rd, but I was just going to ask you, how is the buy-in for the event now?
We have indications that we have 3 teams who are quite firm. We've talked to 7 others that have asked for the welcome package. I have it here in front of me. I don't know if you can see it. It's the information that comes from Construction in terms of what the rules are. They're very specific rules. Construction is an international event. It's held in 150 countries all around the world. And it's actually a design and construction competition that is promoted by engineers and architects around the world to teach people and to promote the idea of professional careers in design and in engineering. We have some engineer volunteers who will be helping the teams design their structures to make them to make sure they don't all collapse with the weight of all those cans.
Right.
But it's there's a lot of room for creativity in terms of what the exhibit is going to look like. We have examples. I don't know if you can see them, but everything from an Eiffel Tower to the International Bridge. We'd love to see a team try to do a replica of the Water Tower. I think that would be a really interesting. Possibly the International Bridge or the Greyhound logo. So it could be very, very broad and very, very creative what the teams are able to come up with in terms of a design.
I saw some of that. That is indeed very creative. You really have to know what you're doing.
Well, you want to make sure that the design is going to be stable. You don't want it to collapse, and there's some pretty strict rules that construction has in terms of what you can and can't use to support your exhibit. They want you to use engineering techniques, structural techniques that engineers know and architects know. So it's really meant to both be creative but also be structurally sound, and obviously using large numbers of cans. Some of the exhibits have 2,000 or 3,000 cans in them. They have to be solid. They can't be hollow.
Yeah.
And many of them are 6 to 8 feet high. So you can imagine if you're making a 6 to 8 foot Inukshuk, for example, that you're going to have to design it in a way that it's going to stand up for the period of time that it's on display, and it's on display for 2 weeks.
Well, exactly. You know, when you go to the grocery store, somebody drops a can and it's dented. You can't have any dented cans in these displays.
That's correct. And then we want to find the right colors of cans, because if, for instance, if you're making a logo, say a sports team logo or a swoosh or something like that, then you want to have the right colors for it, because there are categories, prize categories for all of that, for the number of cans, for the structural design, the most creative one. The public gets to vote on the Viewer's Choice Award.
Right.
So it's a really interactive and participative type kind of an event.
And there's a lot of time. The event is in April and into May as well, where it finishes up.
That's correct. The 2-week period at the end of April and the first week of May is when the competition is actually held and the exhibits are built. The teams have 1 day to construct their structure, and then it's on display and will be judged for 2 weeks. And again, there's opportunities for the public to vote for their favorite entry. We intend to launch construction at a Take 5 we're having with the Chamber of Commerce in February. So I'd like people to know that if they're interested in knowing more about Harvest Algoma and the Food Resource Center, a lot of people still don't know what we're doing in our center in the former Equation Hall. Attend that Take 5 event. I believe it's February 21st. It's 20th or 21st. I'm not exactly sure, but we'll be advertising that. And they could have a tour and learn more about what...
That's where you get started. You kind of get sense and you give people applications.
That's
and
correct.
The process starts going into the end of February to March, and
that's
then
the
you
kickoff.
get geared up in April kind of thing.
That's correct. So we're going to kick it off at the end of February with the Take 5, and then we'll be working with the teams to design their exhibits and work with them to get the cans they need from suppliers and do some prototypes, and we'll continue to inform the community how it's coming along with some through our social media sites, what some of the different ideas the teams are coming up with.
Now, at the end of the day, this is one huge food drive, isn't it? It's better than going door to door. Your intake for the community is potentially huge with this event.
Well, that's correct. And as I say, the Sarnia folks told us that their 10th anniversary construction event raised over 40,000 cans of food. And so we're hopeful that if we can attract 5 to 8 teams, that we'd be looking at 10 to 15,000 cans of food for our first event, and that would really go a long way to replenish the supplies both at the Food Resource Center and in the pantries of some of the agencies that we support.
All right, Mike, stand by there. We're going to take a couple of quick commercial messages, and we'll be back with ONNPoint right after these messages.
season, so this is probably pretty stupid, right? Actually, hunting accidents kill somewhere around 2 people a year in Ontario. Smoking kills 16,000 a year. So, what's really stupid?
Welcome back to ONNPoint. I'm Andy Martins. We're live on Facebook. If you like this show, like the Sue Online on TV Facebook, YouTube page, and we'd appreciate you tuning in every week. We do these shows live Monday and Tuesday. We're back to Mike Delfrey from United Way Harvest Algoma, and Mike, we're having a good talk, a lot of information. You're a wealth of information for this community. And let's talk about food insecurity. For me and the benefit of my viewers, this term is sort of something that everybody doesn't quite understand, and that you can explain it to us.
Sure. Well, the notion of food insecurity really varies by obviously different people and different families. It really is a measure of how secure, how able people are to count on having the food they need and they want on a daily basis. So if you're not sure if you're going to have the food you want on a regular basis, then you become food insecure. And then if you find that you've actually been missing meals, or you've had to make choices between buying food or paying for other things, then the degree of insecurity increases, all the way up to people who have to depend on food banks or soup kitchens, which means they have no food at all, or they don't have enough food and they have to look for outside sources. So food security means people know they don't have either the food they want or need for themselves or their families on a reliable basis, or have to make choices about whether or not they buy food or not. So it's a much bigger problem than people realize, as I said earlier, because hunger is kind of an invisible problem in a community.
Right. That's right. People don't really know in the community. We live our own lives and they don't understand the invisible gray area. It's a problem, and people are too involved in their own lives.
Well, I think the other kind of relevant factor here is that a lot of the skills that people used to do, a lot of the activities and skills that people had, there were more people who used to garden and more people used to preserve. And if you're able to do that, if you're able to grow food, or if you're able to cook food or preserve food, then by the very nature of food, which almost always harvest at the same time, you have a large volume of food, you need to preserve that in a way that you'll have it for the winter or when the times that you need it. And a lot of those skills have disappeared, as well as the kind of lifestyles that we have. People either don't have the cooking equipment or the preserving equipment or the time to do it. And all that results in a higher degree of food insecurity.
Right. And while we're talking about food insecurity, you might want to let our viewers know, again, as what you guys do on Second Line with Harvest Algoma. There, it's a very important job that you have for this community.
Yes, well, 2 years ago, the United Way decided that it was going to take responsibility for food security in the community, which is one of the primary pillar areas of the poverty reduction strategy.
Right.
So the United Way went ahead and designed a center, found a facility, the former Croatian Hall, where we could receive large volumes of food that come into the community from producers and manufacturers in southern Ontario, as well as food that we can rescue from from restaurants and grocery stores, or get donated from people's gardens and so forth. So now we have a facility on Second Line with a large dry goods warehouse, a large commercial kitchen, and commercial size freezers, walk-in freezers, so we can process, store, and distribute large volumes of food. We're at somewhere between 150 and 175,000 pounds of food that have come through our center since we opened.
Wow.
In another couple of months, we will be installing 200-foot greenhouses on our property, which will give us the ability to grow a lot of food. Our food rescue program that we have support from Second Harvest for is now rescuing on average 1,000 to 1,500 pounds a week from restaurants and grocery stores, and that's food that previously would have been probably, in most cases, thrown away, just thrown in the garbage from banquets or weddings, because there were rules and there were laws that prevented that food from being donated. All of that's changed. Now we have people and equipment and vehicles to actually rescue that food and either distribute it to people who need it in their agencies or process it so it has a longer shelf life.
I think that was the right decision to change that rule, because that was outrageous how much food we were throwing out in Canada alone.
Well, it's estimated that 40 to 50% of the food that's grown in Canada is wasted. There's a lot of reasons for it. It happens in a lot of different ways, but it's half of the food supply that ends up in landfills, and it's compounded by the fact that that food is creating greenhouse gases that are going into the atmosphere from landfills. So if we can reduce that, not only can we feed hungry people, we can have a better impact on the environment.
Wonderful, yeah, and we needed to do something. It was a huge problem. Now, Ward 2 Councillor Lisa Vazeau-Allen has Grocer for Good, which is opening soon.
Yep.
This is, again, another important piece of the puzzle in the community of what you're doing and what Lisa wants to do.
Yes, absolutely. Lisa and I and my staff at Harvest Algoma have met several times to talk about how we can support Grocer for Good, which is a pay-what-you-can grocery store on Gore Street, right across from the Neighborhood Resource Center, and where Helping Hands is. So it's becoming a kind of center in the community for folks who need a hand up, who need assistance. The Grocer for Good operation is a training center for people with autism to get some vocational skills. We intend to support it with a variety of cooked and baked products, either that we manufacture ourselves, along with some lost leaders, things that we get donated to us that they wouldn't be able to sell, but it would be a second access point in the community for certain products, because our center is not a food bank for the public. So they'd be able to go to Grocer for Good on Gore Street. And some of the things that we're thinking about that people really need, there's a wide variety, including, believe it or not, personal care products, which are very expensive and people need regardless of what their income level is. So we'll have a very close working relationship with Grocer for Good.
And you made a good point. The other two entities that are there on Gore Street, it really makes sense that Grocer for Good is at the location they're going to be at in the next couple of weeks.
Absolutely, it's become that region of the downtown has become a bit of a hub. With the closure of Walmart, we know that there's what's called a food desert in the downtown core of our city, and Grocer for Good is going to make
fill that void in a big way. And
that's correct.
It's a brilliant idea from Lisa Vazeau-Allen. Let's move on to poverty, Mike. What is the state of poverty in Sault Ste. Marie? Are we getting any better heading now into 2020?
Well, I think one of the things that the United Way and agencies have done that will start to give us some indication is there's a community indicators report that has just recently been produced, and I believe will be released any day now. And it has a whole series of measures of the programs and the services that are aimed at the major problems of homelessness and hunger and lack of information that people need for the programs and services. And as we start to measure those, the numbers of people through that series of indicators, we'll start to get an idea of, are we making some progress in reducing poverty and reducing hunger in the community?
Oh, okay.
We know in the case of hunger, simply by the amount of food that we've brought into the community that wasn't coming in before Harvest Algoma was created. And we're talking hundreds, well over 100,000 pounds of food. That's additional that has gone through the agencies. It's gone in a lot of cases to the pantries at the college and the university. We have programs now through the social service hubs where we're providing them with food every week. And obviously with that volume of food, we're starting to have an impact on reducing hunger in the community.
Mike, unbelievable. The time has gone on us already, but we're going to have you back again because there's lots to talk about. United Way, Harvest Algoma are making a real impact in this city.
We think so, and we're going to keep at it. We have a long way to go. But as we build our capacity with gardens and greenhouses and more and more people adding a row to their garden and donating that food, we hope inside of a year or two that we'll be able to say that any hunger that's left and happening in the community is really just small pockets that we just haven't identified yet. The kind of reach that we will have through the agencies in the communities and through organizations like seniors organizations is getting better all the time.
Awesome, Mike, thanks very much. I'll be back to wrap up the show right after these messages.
This is On TV.
Hi, can I take your order? Hello?
Oh, hey. Wait, what was the question?
Let me guess. One driving high combo, extra baked?
No. Could I get a burger with a side of fries?
Think you're a better driver when you're high? Think again. If you smoked weed, wait at least 4 hours before getting behind the wheel, or don't drive at all if you're new to it, have eaten it, or if you've mixed it with alcohol.
In your home, lighting is just as important as style.
With PowerView Motorization from Hunter Douglas, you can schedule your shades to light up the room, create privacy, or both, automatically. No hands required.
So your shades will always be in the right place at the right time in style. And it's only from Hunter Douglas.
Imagine knowing about incidents, closures, and roadwork all before starting your trip. Ontario 511 lets you know before you go. You can get real-time information directly from the Ministry of Transportation, because the more you know, the easier it is for you to go. And spend the time doing the things that matter most.
Welcome back to On Point. Thanks to Mike Telfrey for being on the show. Again, a reminder, if you like us on Facebook and subscribe to the Sioux Online on TV YouTube channel, we'd be thrilled. We do this twice a week. Al Arrington tomorrow to talk about governance and the impeachment. Again, next week on Point, Greg Lefebvre, the dealer principal of Superior Dodge and Superior Nissan, and the mayor of Sault Ste. Marie, Christian Provenzano. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a great day.